Hey guys, I wanted to welcome everybody to my Q&A session. My name is Armin. I'm happy to have you guys here listening to this video. But there's going to be more of these sessions coming because I've been getting a lot more of questions that I feel like kind of need to be put out there. This one is a little bit interesting because I feel like this conversation always comes up no matter what. Who you're talking to or what age group you're talking to. This question inevitably always comes up when you're talking about bodybuilding. So the question came to me through Instagram, and this individual asked me what I thought about Arnold's day of bodybuilding compared to today's bodybuilding. And of course, like we always, anytime you talk about the good old days, there's always like a fallacy of superiority of those days. Even if you take a look in your own life, often when you discuss things of the past, you generally feel good about those days. So in comparison to what's going on today, today never can match up to the past. So your mind tends to want to remember only the good times, right? So in bodybuilding, it kind of works the same way, but there is like real evidence, real video, real pictures that you can look to determine what era is best. Now, with that being said, by and large, most people's golden era of bodybuilding comes down to the 90s, right? Where you have Ronnie Coleman, you have Flex Wheeler, you have, what is the gentleman's name? Now my mind is going blank. But anyways, there's multiple of bodybuilders during those years that you have Lee Priest, that's who I was thinking about, Levroni, so several others, and many of which Cormier, many of which are slipping my mind as I'm talking. I'm kind of remembering them, but the point is that is normally considered the golden era of bodybuilding, and a large reason why that's the case is because you had a combination, the type of physiques that you had were a combination of mass, but along with aesthetics, right? And that really elicited a lot of people's awe. So like when people would look upon these bodybuilders, they're like, wow, they're massive, but they're also like look good. They're proportionate. Their waist is small. They've got a V taper. They've got an upside down triangle. They look like a bigger version of what a common man would want to look like. They were still bigger than by and large than any like normal person would want to look like, right? But you could see yourself looking like a downsized version of that and being like, oh, I want to look like that, right? So that was really like a big deal. Now Arnold's time, of course, was the premiere of that when you couple with what's going on today, right? So like obviously Arnold and his contemporaries couldn't look to the future and see how big people were going to get. So for their time, they were considered to be, extremely large individuals, right? A lot, really muscular, when you compare that to the rest of the men around who rarely ever worked out, right? So that was just the scene of the times. And so Arnold and all those guys were, considered to be huge, but in comparison to today's bodybuilding, they look like they probably would be a lot smaller than men's physiques competitors. So Arnold's day, to answer the question of what I think of how bodybuilding is today compared to the day of Arnold is, I think there's pros and cons, right? Like there's pros and cons to everything, and we have to kind of acknowledge both if we want to be unbiased, right? So the pros of today's bodybuilding, from an athletic standpoint, of course, is the fact that the people are larger than life, right? They're enormous. They look like superheroes, right? The the baseline weight of most of these people have doubled, compared to in Arnold's time. I mean, it is not uncommon to have someone pushing 300 pounds, on the Olympia stage. That's a common thing. I mean, Big Ramy is in the off season. He's way bigger than that, right? Like he's three something. Most of those guys are three something in the off season. Obviously, they cut down, but they're still in the high 90s. Hottie Shoop and all those guys. So that they're huge and they're larger than life and they're massive, and because of that they're massive stars, because people look at them, no offense, like a freak show, which is essentially what it is. It's an athlete, but it's an athlete that pushes his body to a point where a normal person would look at them and think of something reminiscent of a superhero like the Hulk or something like that, right? So that is the pro, and it draws people in, right? You have more people coming in to look at that. They're like, oh wow, this is amazing, like this is incredible, all that stuff. But it draws more people into the sport, directly because of men's bodybuilding. I believe, my opinion, that directly because of men's bodybuilding that we have all these other divisions, is why we have men's physique, is why we have men's fitness, is why we have all the women's divisions. And because men's bodybuilding, men's open bodybuilding does so well, and people are so interested in and view it as such a niche, a sport that you really need to be like into to appreciate, right? It's a very niche sport. It's not common. People aren't like, it's a very close-knit environment, close-knit brotherhood, so to speak, right? So I believe like others wanted to have something similar, and because of that, because they couldn't, not everybody can get to that size, not everybody can compete in men's open bodybuilding, but they still wanted to have that kind of camaraderie and a division and a sport that they can participate in, that they could push their natural genetics and talents into, or put into. All these other divisions came into play, right? So I mean, this was years in the making. Obviously, with wellness being the last thing added to the IFBB, but it would not surprise me if we have more of this happening, more divisions happening. Hard to see where that would be, but I'm sure if there's an opportunity to do so, it'll happen. So so there's the pros of today's bodybuilding. Now the cons is what most people think about, right? With the large size of these people, we're talking about, there's no way around it. So we're just going to go ahead and say there's extreme use of anabolics and other performance enhancing drugs that get them to that level, right? And there's some health concerns, to say the least. I'm using very subdued language here, but I think we all know what I'm talking about. It's health concerns is a very like subdued term. I mean, it's darn near critical, when you're pushing that much performance enhancing drugs through your body. It's very hard for anybody to stay alive for a long period of time. And that is why you have people dropping at 50 years old. It happens all the time. Just recently, it happened, a couple of people died. So it's insane. And then you have some people dying even before that, right? Like Dallas McCarver comes to mind. I mean, you're talking about, what, 20-year-old man? 20-something, in his 20s. That's something to be said. Now, of course, the audience, most people are just going to say, well, we're sad, they're going to send out their thoughts and good vibes and prayers. And, be done with it and move on, with the next show and the next, the next group of guys. But if we want to really stop and we want to really analyze like what's happening here, we have to understand that at this point in age, at this time, if you want to be an elite level bodybuilder, and I mean an open bodybuilder, and we can get into the other divisions too, but primarily an open bodybuilder, and you want to push that much, that much of performance enhancing drugs through your body for, 20 years, you want to carry 300 plus, pounds. You want to, work out hard and push your heart, right? Because some of these guys, that's the interesting thing. It's like, so they'll have all this weight on them, right? So that bogs down your system, your cardiovascular system, your nervous system, all these systems that your body has to keep you healthy. So that heavy weight bogs you down. And remember, the body doesn't know if it's muscle or fat, primarily. All it knows is there's a ton of weight on you, and you're trying to, live with that weight on you. And so you're doing that, but then I look at some of these guys' workouts, like leg workouts and everything like that, and they're doing very intense work. So you're combining this heavy weight with all this, drug use, and then you're pushing your body athletically as well. That's a recipe for disaster. And honestly, some people I look at, and I'm amazed that they could even make it 20 years under those kind of conditions. Now, again, we're talking about people at the elite level, right? And there's an argument there too. Genetics comes into play, but I think most of us can agree that if your genetics are predisposed to having like heart problems and things like that, performance enhancing drugs at that level will absolutely exacerbate all those problems, right? So, and it's easy to say, like you'll hear that a lot of times in the media, in the bodybuilding media in particular, you'll hear people blame like somebody's weight or somebody's genetics, almost excusing the fact of performance enhancing drugs. And this video is not necessarily about the ramifications of it, or you should or shouldn't use it. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. This is really analyzing the differences between Arnold's day bodybuilding and today, and discussing this con. Like we talked about the pros. This is the con. You really can't talk about bodybuilding and not say that this is a huge detriment to the sport. It's impossible to have bodybuilding naturally nowadays with the physiques that we've seen. So there is some performance enhancing drugs that are going to be used. Like, that's a given. It was used in Arnold's day. It's going to be used now. Athletes use it in different sports, not just bodybuilding, football, soccer, combat sports, everything. They're all using performance enhancing drugs because innately, being an athlete, you want to win. If you want to win, you take anything, that will give you an edge. So, therefore, majority of the people do use something, right, to win, whatever it takes. But in bodybuilding, it's a real problem. It's a real problem. I think we're seeing it now. I think enough time has gone by when people are using these high doses of performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs, that we're seeing the effects of these substances long term at those levels, and that's the key, right? At those levels, because you have people like Arnold and the guys in those times. That's one of their pros during that time, and by pros I mean like benefits, not professional, but benefits of working out and being a bodybuilder in those times is, while they did use things, they were so minor and so minute that they beneficially affected their physique without causing major damage to their system. We can't say it didn't cause any damage, but it was pretty low considering that most of those guys are still, doing well and living up to their 70s and 80s, which is the average, human being dies in the 70s and 80s, assuming that that there's no, other things going on. But so they're living full lives essentially, but today's bodybuilders aren't. And we are seeing that now all the time. All the time people are dropping dead. So, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what that means for the sport as a whole. I imagine everything will just keep going the same way. People will keep pushing the envelope. We'll get great bodybuilding, but we're also going to lose a lot of people. And I think that's kind of where it is and where it's heading. The physiques have gotten worse, so that's a con. And by worse, I mean not as aesthetically pleasing. So if you're a person that enjoys mass monsters, then this is it. Like, this is the time, right? But as far as actually aesthetically pleasing physiques, that's difficult to find. You'll get a couple, right? Brandon Curry is definitely one of those. Hadi Choopan, to a degree, is also. But by and large, all these guys that are in the top, 5 or 10, they're all massive, and a lot of them have extended abdomen issues. And that's just part of the territory that comes with being that big, using that much stuff, all that as a combination, eating all that food and everything like that. And that's why I wanted to mention, as I was talking about earlier, that some people will point to just the weight or just the genetics as being the cause of some of these problems. They do it to avoid the conversation about the PEDs, but in reality, it's all of it, right? It's all of it. It's the PEDs, it's the extreme weight, it's the extreme eating, it's everything extreme. And anytime, your body always wants to stay in homeostasis. It wants to be balanced. And anytime you put an extreme stress on your body, it's going to cause problems, especially for an extended period of time. You think about somebody who runs, right? You have some, if you do average running for your health, you're golden. It's great. You're absolutely fine. But if you go extreme and then, you're training all the time, you're running all the time, you're doing marathons, you're doing this, you're doing that, well, guess what? In an extreme situation like that, you're going to have problems. You're going to have problems with your legs, your knees, your feet, all kinds of issues. You look at runners, they're like runners, like extreme runners, they'll have major problems with their joints and everything like that. So again, a balanced view, you get the benefits, you don't get as many issues. Extreme for an extended period of time, you're going to have problems. Now again, this is a sport. Sports are extreme by nature. So it is what it is. But I do think that at this point, we're just going to be seeing a lot of people pass away, and we're going to be seeing a lot more bigger bodybuilders and a lot more of them at younger ages. So you have Nick Walker, you have some others. So they're coming up. Hopefully they're smarter about the way they go about it, but it's hard, right? It's hard because you're surrounded by people that are doing things one way, and it's hard to completely change your way of doing things just because there's some concerns, right? Because health concerns, especially to a young person, are not an immediate threat. They always feel like it's down the road, right? I felt that. Most of you guys listening felt that. And what happens is that at a certain point, it reaches you and it's too late, right? So we all know this. But it's easier said than done, right? Nick Walker and many others like him are probably just surrounded by these guys that have been doing things this way, and they're the ones that are passing the knowledge to him and others like him. So it's going to be hard for him to adjust himself to a new way of thinking. And we'll see what happens. I wish him all the best. I wish all of them all the best, but it's not going to be an easy road for sure. And that's kind of the thing with all these divisions, right? We like to believe that the PED use diminishes with the diminishing size of each division, right? Like the bodybuilders use more PEDs than anyone. Then you go like down, they use men's physique uses less. Men's fitness uses less, and so forth, right? Women with the same thing. Women bodybuilder the most. Then you have women's physique. You're hoping for less PED use probably there. At least your mind will tell you that. Then you have, you have wellness. You have figure. And you're thinking, okay, well they're even more diminished in their use of PEDs and to bikini. But the interesting thing is the podcast that I run, shameless plug, Cerebral Stick Up. Go check out my videos. Some of the bikini girls, I had a show specifically about PED use with a girl that competes in bikini about 6 months ago, maybe a little less. But all of them use PEDs too. Again, not to the extent maybe, but still. And you're looking at someone like that and you're like, wow, why would you even need to use anything like that? But it's part of the sport. It's any advantage, right? So that's just the way it works. So, So in a nutshell, the benefits of bodybuilding in Arnold's day, the health was much more secure. The physiques, personally, I feel were much better, much more streamlined. That's why you had somebody like Arnold and others, the Conan brothers, or the Barbarian brothers. I'm sorry, Conan brothers. I don't know what I'm thinking. The Barbarian brothers, and one of them was in Conan. That's what I'm thinking. And others who were bodybuilders and they were movie stars because they were relatable. Their bodies were relatable, even though they were bigger than the average person. Now that's never going to happen. You are now going to have massive bodybuilders in movies. It's just unless they play a very specific role. So that's the pros, and for Arnold's day, it's hard to see the cons for Arnold's day. That's the difference, right? Like it's like you can see the pros and the cons of today's bodybuilding, but it's hard to see the cons of Arnold's day bodybuilding, the 70s bodybuilding, 80s bodybuilding. Very hard to see the cons of that because they have great physiques. They didn't use many PEDs. The only thing that you could say is maybe during their time, they just didn't know how to train as well as they do today. There's more science behind the training, more behind the eating. But they did all right. Whatever they knew worked. So, yeah. So at this point, I think we're in the long haul as far as bodybuilding. I think it's going to be a minute before we see some major jumps in size, but I think gradually you'll see people pushing the envelope more and more. People are going to get bigger and bigger. There's another video probably that should come out about how can we control the size of some of these athletes, knowing that they have an innate inclination to get larger. But that's another video for another day. Thank you guys for listening.